necessary to implement and administer this program. The bill would take effect upon publication in the statute book, and I will note that the substitute for House Bill 2466 did pass the House on a vote of 115 to 4, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, what questions do you have for our revisers? Seeing none, we'll move forward. Thank you so much. We'll start off with testimony from Representative Steve Hubert. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a privilege and an honor to be here before you again. I first started looking at this issue probably about 6 years ago, saw some data that we were just not doing as well as we should be in the area of teaching computing science to our kids. I've worked closely with Katie Hedrickson with ks.gov, and they put out some yearly rankings, and we've been, in regards to the number of classes offered, the number of students taking these classes, I think at the time we were ranked 49th. 4 years ago, I had a bill that would allow a computing science class to count as a science or math credit. Representative Dietrich was my vice chair when we heard that. We didn't get that passed, but we did get a commitment to form a task force and to start looking at the issue on what we needed to do. And this summer, the state board did agree to that. When they agreed to it, though, there was just more that needed to happen in regards to getting classes offered and teachers trained. And because of that, I started working on a bill this summer. And, you know, this was modeled after Arkansas. Arkansas has really been one of the leaders on this issue, and they have a graduation requirement. But the reality is, in Kansas, we're just not ready for that. I knew that from the beginning. My plan all along was to compromise back to the primary intent of the bill, which is getting teachers trained and classes offered. And once I did that, all the frowns were turned upside down, and there was agreement that putting the money in there to get teachers trained and classes offered was how we began to move forward towards a graduation requirement. I am on the graduation requirement task force, and I am asking them to consider in the future, when we are ready to, you know, to look at that it be considered. But again, we got to move forward right now, and this bill helps us to accomplish that goal. I will tell you that Scott Deloche is a professor at Kansas State University. He has a great program. It's already in place. They've already got it started. They've been doing it online. They've been getting teachers trained to teach it along with the online portion of it. It's ready to go. It's for any school district that wants to offer this class right now, they can. And the money in this bill helps provide the ability with both our college students who want to become certified in this area to get certified, but it also allows current teachers who recognize they might have a background, they could come up to speed. Even there's going to be classes offered this summer for teachers to be able to take his training and program and be qualified to teach his program in our schools, you know, right away. Right now, a student can take this class online if they feel like this is an area that they want to, you know, to start learning, and they can do it right now. But again, this bill helps facilitate moving us forward. 70% of all new jobs for our kids and our grandkids are going to require these skills, and we need to do better. I would appreciate your support in helping to get this bill passed. And with just, I'm going to, you know, put a plug in for another bill. I'll just take 30 seconds. When I go back up to committee, we're working 2631. It's a compromise. It's a pilot program on getting certifications for those you know, skills that kids need for the, you know, with technical education and a lot of different things that they can get jobs if they're not going to college. It's a good bill, wasn't ready to get passed, and that's why I'm doing it as a pilot program. I'm going to try to get it passed on the floor. If you tweak this bill in a way that it would go to conference, we could maybe, you know, similar topics, we could pull them together. I throw that out. I told the chairman about that idea. And again, this issue, I don't think we'll have any trouble getting it passed. The CTE is a good complement in pulling those two issues together, and I will stand for questions.
Committee, since Ed Chair Hubert needs to get to his committee meeting. We'll go ahead and ask him any questions that you have for his testimony. We'll start with Senator Petty, then Senator Straub.
It helps to provide a mic. So I did read through the bill, because you have there's two parts there. One is concerning computer science courses. The other one is concerning training for teachers and for teachers. So I'm going to ask you about the coursework. And so since you've been looking into this for a while, is there any high school in the state of Kansas that doesn't offer a computer science class right now?
Yes.
How many?
I don't have an exact number. We're doing a good job in our urban areas because they have some natural advantages. Where we're falling short in right now is maybe the rural areas. And there are rural areas that are teaching. But even as we do better in that area, other states are getting further. That's why we continue to rank towards the bottom. And that's why there's just a need for more classes to be offered right now. And this bill will help facilitate that. If you're going to have more classes, you need more teachers training. Current teachers already teaching right now can come up and get certified, and then teachers that are in school and college getting their teaching degrees, they can get certified in this area. I believe it to be an area of job security to be teaching in this area because it is the future. There's a great need for teachers to be trained so we can offer more classes.
Thank you.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Hubert, for being here. Concerning the teaching portion of the bill, currently, I believe, with a bachelor's degree and industry or career experience, you can get an alternative teaching certificate to teach certain classes like computer technology or math or what have you. How does this bill help utilize those professionals, especially in rural areas?
I think they complement. There's already ways to do it, and this is just helping to facilitate more ways, and it's putting money in there to provide these scholarships, both with current teachers and new teachers. And then, what you're talking about, there's already it's not like this is, a new idea. It's just facilitating and helping us to do better.
Any other questions? Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, thank you for being here. You mentioned there were some that weren't offering computer science. Is this due to cost, or did they just say why?
Well, and some of those schools might be offering, a technical class. And I know some have argued that what they're offering rises to the level of being considered a computing science class. I know that ks.gov, they have requirements on what counts and doesn't count across the country, so we're apples to apples comparison. And so, there are technical education classes and things that are good classes, but they're not getting into the heart of what, we really need to be teaching our kids in the area of computing science. And again, Scott Deloche at Kansas State, he's got a good basic program where, you can take classes in the high school level, you can get credit, dual credit, and then go and take it to the next level with his program, because it's built, through a stepstone process to, if you want to, major in computing science, he has an ability for you to do that. But everybody needs to have some basic skills in this area. The jobs of today require it, and it's only going to become more so in the future. And again, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just shining the light on an area where we can do better, providing resources. And more than anything else, I'm telling people this can be a public relations campaign, working with local school boards. I have worked with Mark Tallman to help promote this. School boards can recognize, take the steps, this spring, get teachers from their school districts signed up, qualified and certified, and start offering the classes next fall.
Finally, I didn't see a fiscal note for this.
There's, I took out the line item that would have been a line item in the budget because my appropriation chair always gets a little nervous when we're adding line items. And there's proviso language that's drawn up. There's 1 million for our K-12 teachers for the, to get trained and certified, and then another 1 million for scholarships at the college level. And it's not just the border regions. The private colleges have been written into this bill, and it's wherever teachers are being trained, we have the ability for those teachers, if they're getting teachers training, to include this as a part of what they can teach.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions, committee? I will ask you very quickly before you need to leave. We have some opponent testimony, and part of the opponent testimony indicates that from a legislative standpoint, we're out of our lane. So please revisit where you are right now.
And I don't know if that was most of that type of testimony. The State Department of Education is supportive now. Ben Jones has communicated. Almost all of the opponents initially were opposing because of the graduation requirement. But, I believe this is our lane. We've had, even this fall, you were there when we had the testimony from our advisors in regards to how the legislature works with the state board, the Department of Education, and this is very much in our lane. But I recognized, even as I put out what I called a roadmap on how we get to a graduation requirement, that was, I think, a piece where some people felt like that wasn't our lane. I felt like a roadmap was important. I put it in, but it was my goal all along to go back to what truly is our cooperative role of working with them to meet the need. And so for anybody who makes the argument, I would strongly and respectfully disagree and believe that, again, most of the opponents have agreed to support this bill now that there isn't a graduation requirement and it focuses on classes offered, teachers trained.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you, and I'll get you more information hopefully as we work on this other CTE bill. It's something that you probably won't get to have a hearing on, but hopefully we can look at it in conference.
Okay, thank you very much. Committee, we are going to pause briefly from our testimony on House Bill 2466 because you noticed we're now full as far as attendance, and we have the master teachers, those that were recognized in 2020 and 2022. So we have those two classes that have come in. And we'll start with the class of 2020. We have, is it Justin Heek? Hecky, sorry. So go ahead and stand up, Justin, in the back row. Justin is here from Dodge City, and tell us what you teach. Wonderful. And how long have you been teaching? This is my 10th year. We're glad to have you. Keep standing. Next we have Erica. Is it Huggard? There we go. And Erica is here from Emporia. And tell us what you teach and how long you've been there.
I teach sophomore bio, anatomy, physiology, and health, and I've been teaching for 16 years.
Awesome. And next we have Kathy Wagoner. Yay, I got it right, from Hayes. And tell us what you teach, Kathy.
I teach junior and senior English language arts, and I've been teaching for 18 years.
Okay, so we are going to give the class of 2020 some recognition. Awesome. Thank you so much. And now we're going to address the class of 2022. We have Melanie Hammond from Salina. And Melanie, you teach, what do you teach?
Chemistry and physical science. This is my 21st year.
You started when you were 15, didn't you? Awesome. Okay. Andy Battenfield from Emporia. So tell us what you teach.
I teach K-5 physical education at the elementary school in Emporia.
And how long have you been teaching?
This is my 19th year.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, Sarah Hoff from Dodge City. Tell us what, you get it by now, what you're going to tell us.
I teach 9th grade world history and 11th grade American history. This is my 18th year teaching.
Again, started at 15, right? Oh, my. We have Karen Stolman. Stolman Henderson. There we go. From Overland Park. Which school district? Wonderful.
I teach math and engineering, and this is my 30th year. And when I was really little, Miss Petty was in my elementary school.
Oh. There, and she just started teaching, right? You were really little, and she
Very
just.
young at the
Yes, there we go. Gina Johnson from Hayes.
I teach 4th and 5th grade. This is my 20th year.
Wonderful. And Barbara Tholen, Lawrence. There we go. Last, we have Brian Scruggs from Geary County. Wow. Okay, so here is our class of 2022, master teachers. We so appreciate you being here today with us. We're sorry that COVID kind of interrupted just about everything for 2 years, but we are glad that you're here, glad for you to be recognized for your dedication and your hard work. We are going to continue with our hearing. This is a bill that establishes computer knowledge and that requirement for having a computer education course before kids graduate from high school. So if you are needing to leave, you can. If you want to stick with us, you can. It really is up to you, but I'm certain that Mark Tallman, the Associate Executive Director of Kansas Association of School Boards, would love to have you hear his testimony, because I think he's switched sides, but I don't know what to say, Mark. Thank you.
My proven ability to empty a room comes through again. Many KSB meetings, the meeting is over when the last person is left, and sometimes that happens pretty quickly. So thank you, members of the committee. I'm Mark Tallman from KSB. We do appear as a proponent of this bill. We were initially neutral on the bill because of the graduation requirement issue. We appreciate Representative Hubert's flexibility and the House's agreement on this. It does move us to a kind of a quasi-mandate of offering a course, but even there, it does provide some flexibility by letting a district develop a plan to get there if they can't get there immediately. My testimony really just talks about, although we're often concerned about mandates, as you well know, we've also kind of tried to embrace the ideas of Kansans Can, the Rose Standards, which talks about preparing kids for the workforce to be competitive with other states. There is, and I'll be honest, just looking at this bill, acquainted with me with some of the research that I think is troubling, that Kansas may be falling behind in some of these areas. And I think Representative Hubert stated this well, as not only would this provide, if it's funded, some resources to give us the teachers to do the job, but also is kind of public relations, public awareness around this particular topic, and we're trying to work with him on that. So be happy to take questions at the appropriate time.
Now is that time. Committee, do you have questions? I do. So this bill specifically requires for the school year 23-24, each high school operated by a school district will either offer at least one computer science course. So offer one computer science course or submit a plan on how the school district intends to offer a computer. So it's a plan of action, or they're going to already be doing it. So do you have any idea how many school districts have a high school that doesn't offer a computer science course?
Madam Chair, I do not, and I'm honestly trying to remember. Much of this is driven, as Chairman Huber talked about, by code.org, does a national report, and it kind of grades all states. I believe that report may have that information, but I don't recall it. I could try to look for it, but it does indicate that compared to other states, we are certainly toward the lower portion by that definition. So I can't give you a number, but that the data would indicate that we are not only not offering it in every district, but we are not necessarily being competitive with other states which are doing more.
So here's my question as a follow-up. For some school districts, it's been a year, others it's been a year and a half, some almost 2 years, where all learning was virtual. So how did those school districts that aren't offering at least one computer science course, how was learning occurring virtually? How was that really occurring if we didn't have an instructor that was trained to even teach that course, if we didn't have that course available? And I would say, to me, that last opportunity would be high school, but this isn't even requiring middle school or elementary. So how is it possible that learning was going on virtually, and that they were able to appropriately adapt for those students if that was never even something made available during face-to-face times?
I don't know if I can give you a great answer for that, and I apologize. I guess the distinction might be between teaching anything virtually versus the content to teach computer science education. And so I guess I would say, you know, when all districts were having to try to do this remotely, everyone was having to try to use the technology to teach, but they were teaching, you know, they were teaching the content they normally would. This is really focusing on teachers having the ability to teach about computer science in whatever mode we're doing it. And I believe the bill, I hope the bill still specifies that one way that could be done is virtually, which we think would allow some, you know, this will be difficult for some smaller districts, but if they're able to work in consortia or in other ways, we hope that will allow them to offer it. So I'm sorry if that's not direct to, that's, I think, the best I can do on that.
Well, it's fine, but I mean, the real issue is teachers were unable to teach other teachers if you didn't even have them yet in that district. So it would be also interesting, I'm assuming those districts are still taking state assessments online. So how is that? You know, that would be interesting to have a follow-up. Senator Dietrich.
If I could just weigh in on this just very quickly.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about this in the House, this has been a topic for many, 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 many years.
It is.
It was how do you define computer science education? And it feels to me, if I remember correctly, there was a lot of programming and coding that was a part of that, and algorithms and being able to think through that process. And so when we're teaching virtually, it's not programming and
No, it's not.
yeah, so I think that was the distinction when we were looking at computer science programs. And part of the issue with the ks.gov was how you list the courses that you teach. So if you went through someone's course guide and they didn't specifically list computer science education, but listed something else, you didn't get credit for that. Not that we shouldn't do more, we should, absolutely. But I think that's part of the issue, how you define computer science education, how we're currently teaching it, and how does it relate to what you were talking about, Chair Baumgartner, about our teachers teaching virtually.
Well, and I'm looking at the data from Kansas Chamber where it says only 27% of public high schools in Kansas teach foundational computer science courses. That foundational. But it seems to me if it's that small, there's not much that's coming before that even.
Right, and the only, and again, I think the reason we're supporting this bill is we need to improve those numbers. I think, as Chairman Hubert said, most of the larger districts with the most students do have access to these programs, and so the percent of students with access is greater, but that's still a lot of districts where that is the case. And I think again, the ks.gov report talks about even in districts and in other states where there is more of this provided, we still see kind of gaps among different student groups that also need to be addressed. And one of the things in the bill, I don't remember the specific numbers, but it really talks about kind of giving preference in grants and training to help out rural schools or to help schools that may have more need to work with historically disadvantaged populations. So there is language in the bill, I think, specifically to try to address some of those gaps.
Is it your opinion that high school is appropriate, or should it be middle school? Or was that discussed on the House side?
I don't remember that discussion, and I don't remember discussion. We don't, again, I should say, as KSB, we have not taken that detailed a position on this. We just think this is consistent with the general goals of trying to provide better offering for students to have the skills they will need for the future. And I think the data is pretty clear that this is an area of very important skills for all students to have.
Committee, other questions? Senator Petty.
I'm going to ask a question that you kind of just weighed in and said, hey, we haven't really looked at the details, but in the bill, it asks for a report that comes from the state board in January of every year. And one of the things it has in there is it says the number of teachers prepared by high-quality professional learning providers. I'm just, what does your organization see as high-quality professional learning providers?
I believe, and I apologize if I'm wrong, that there is a definition for that in the bill. I think if there isn't, that would be up to the State Department.
The advisor just informed me to read better on the first page in a nice way. Okay. Okay, so it does allow for like cooperatives to
Yes.
to be
And that's one of the things we thought was important for this.
right. Yeah, because I mean from my personal experience, you have those within your own staff that can be used as resources without having to always depend on outside sources that can provide that information. And this kind of goes back to the chairman's question. I mean, I know this isn't probably true throughout the state, but when I first saw this, and I know it's been on the House side, and I know it's been issued, it's like, okay, maybe we're a little behind the curve here. I mean, I know that schools are already doing this, and they're doing it at the elementary level. So it's may not be referred, it's not referred to as a computer science course. It's referred to as coding, or but I mean, I'm very well aware of this district that I taught in that they're doing this, and it's part of their math curriculum.
So just to quickly comment on that, when we testified in the House, one of the things that we said is important to go forward is to be aware that the goal really is to make sure students get learn the competency, whatever the course is called or whether it's a standalone unit. I mean, that was one concern we have about making this a graduation requirement or even a course requirement is, we'd like to think we can move in a direction where students can get credit by showing that they've mastered content, whether or not it's assigned to a particular course or whether you have a course to graduate. That still, you have to come back and make sure you actually are teaching and assessing that that's known. My sense is, from what you're saying, and I think this is what is reported, one of our problems is we do have a lot of variation across the state in districts which are able to provide these and districts which are not doing so or feel they aren't able to do so. And then there is, I think, an issue of definition. There's probably no way around that, but again, the report that we looked at from ks.gov, they have a process, and while it may not capture everything that all of our schools are doing, the same would probably be true of other states. You'd probably run into that same kind of issue, or this may also help us in the State Department do a better job of really identifying what is being offered and how is it being accredited. So again, certainly don't think this solves every problem, but I think we felt that as it was kind of amended and worked through, it is a good place to start to drive improvement.
Senator Straub.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Mark. I'm trying to understand in the bill here, would the class, instead of offering a traditional class, could it be offered as like an 8th hour, like our debate and forensics or theater type clubs that are also, that you might take as an 8th hour and still get credit for those courses? Because I know K-State has a cyber defense club, and those kind of things I think are good ways to teach kids without them maybe even realizing that they're learning, but that they're participating in something that they're interested in.
We would certainly hope that would be the case, and that's what I was really alluding to, is to say the goal, it seems, is to make sure that kids they have access to this information, it's quality information, and they're learning it in some fashion. I suspect, and someone maybe correct me, that that type of definition would be kind of a combination of, number one, what does the local school board give credit to, but then is it aligned with the state standards? Because I think that's one of the triggers of a high-quality class, is to make sure it reflects that standard. So ultimately, the state board will have a role in setting what what can count. But what you're talking about, I think we feel would be very important.
I'm going to call on the reviser real quick, and then we'll go back to Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to point the committee's attention to the top of page 2. There, starting in line 3, it does require that these courses be high quality, meet or exceed the Kansas model standards for computer science established by the state board. And then number 3, I think, kind of gets at the current discussion. These courses need to be made available, and they can be in a traditional classroom setting, blended learning environment, online-based, or other technology-based format that is tailored to meet the needs of each high school and each participating student. So there is a little bit of flexibility there, and I wanted to point that out.
Follow-up question?
Thank you. That does partially answer the question. I know with like debate and forensics, I'm not sure that those instructors or teachers have to be actual certified teachers. Sometimes smaller school districts will hire someone who is qualified in that area, but maybe not have a teaching certificate. So I think it would be very helpful for rural areas, especially, to be able to employ someone like you would a debate or forensics coach to teach a computer science course in the manner of not in the traditional setting of a classroom and maybe not during the regular school hours, but I think we could make this much more flexible and serve a wider base of students.
I would only say, my guess is, if this goes through, as so often the case when you pass a bill, next year we'll hear a lot of questions and maybe issues that were raised to address things if they aren't clear.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you so much. Committee, I do want to remind you that we have proponent written-only testimony from Kent Eccles, Kansas Chamber, from Jason Watkins, Wichita Regional Chamber of Commerce, Katie Henderson, President of ks.gov Advocacy Coalition, Matt Lindsay, President of the Kansas Independent College Association, Dina Horst and Ben Jones, Legislative Liaisons of the Kansas State Board of Education, and Ashley Scheidemann, Executive Director of Flagship Kansas.tech. We do have one opponent testimony, and that is Lauren Tysmiller. Lauren, welcome. Lauren is Director of Government Relations and Elections, Kansas National Education Association.
Thank you, Chairwoman Baumgartner, members of the committee, for allowing me to testify today. We are not opposed to computer science courses. In fact, we completely recognize the need for students to have the opportunity to take them, especially if it aligns with those students' pathways. We did oppose this in the House, and while this bill before you is better than the original version, in that it no longer requires or includes the graduation requirement mandate, because Kansas NEA has democracy as one of our organization's core values, we do want to uphold the Kansas Constitution, which clearly identifies the responsibility of the State Board of Education, and we still believe that requiring schools to submit reports on how they plan to offer a specific course within a specific time frame is still in the purview of the State Board of Education's constitutional duty. We do believe, with that said, we are supportive of the efforts to recruit and retain teachers, and we do believe that the language pertaining to the creation of the incentive programs for professional development for current teachers, but also the scholarship programs for future teachers in computer science could help attract teachers to fill some of these specialty teaching positions. However, we do have, again, some concerns. The original bill did include, as Representative Hubert indicated, the line item of the $2 million. And so we do have some concerns that this would fall in the hope that it gets into the omnibus bill for the funding for these programs. And it is our understanding that a similar effort in Arkansas that allocated $15 million to this effort, as was discussed in the House testimony, fell short. And so as rapidly as technology evolves, teachers would need continuous professional development to stay abreast of the most current trends. And then on top of that, you need to consider the fact that they would need the materials and the equipment and all of that to stay current, to remain relevant. And they would need access to reliable internet. So teaching and learning on obsolete technology with unreliable internet is not beneficial. So again, we believe that computer science classes are important. The only element of this bill that we do not support at this time is the requirement that schools report when they're going to offer these classes to the state board, because we do believe that should be left to the state board to decide what needs to be reported to them by school districts. And ultimately, we're concerned that this could become yet another instance where our educators are asked to do more with less. And so we just ask that you take that into consideration. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Lauren, for being here. And I would totally agree. I think resources are probably, this is a reflection of so many things that without those resources, reliable internet connections and the materials, I know within, as I was referring to the programs that are being offered at the elementary level, that teacher went for a grant and to enhance the materials that she had available to work with fourth graders on coding. So are you absolutely right? We need to, as we look at this, it can't just be the training that's involved. There has to be the resources available as well.
Committee, any other comments or questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Committee, that closes our hearing on substitute for House Bill 2466. We do have a bit of time remaining, so I would like us to have some discussion on Senate Bill 455. In the context of, so we did hear yesterday from Senator Dietrich. She went through the rundown of what she had drafted and had communicated with our reviser. Are there any suggestions of additional amendments? Is there any direction that you want to take in particular? I would like to say that I think we touched briefly yesterday about having two actual dates, having for the fall and then having for the spring as well. So I think we need to kind of come up with a date that would be appropriate, giving the school district enough time to kind of put together, to one, receive those applications if there's going to be a spring transfer, and at what point they'll be able to fulfill. And that it would also require that they would be able to make it known once that semester started or the school year started, how many seats or positions would be available in different classes. There was that consideration. The other that I had was on page 5 of the bill, section I, which is down towards the bottom. In the bill, it does say that each year the Legislative Division of Post Audit shall randomly select 10% of the school districts. I think that what we really need to be looking at is the Department of Education audits enrollment after the count date is when they begin those audits. And so it seems to me that that ought to be a part of that annual process that the Department of Education executes with regard to enrollment. And so they would at that time be able to look at what applications they had received and approved and the non-resident students that were denied, and they would be able to look through those. I don't envision that this is going to be a massive effort. So we're not talking about hundreds and hundreds per school district. So I think it would be appropriate for the Department of Education to do that, and not just 10% of school districts, but to look at all school districts with that process. And quite frankly, I agree with something that was said, I believe yesterday, in that, well, if there's a problem, we'll hear about it. The Department of Education will hear about it. The school boards will hear about it. But I do think there would be a point, perhaps the third year of implementation, for there to be a legislative post-audit to see, and maybe it's the fourth year, but I think it might be appropriate then to have legislative post-audit to look at it and see if perhaps there's a more efficient way to go about the process or whatever. Senator Petty.
I'm just asking a question about what you just talked about. And you mentioned about the Department of Ed looking at all schools, or providing, I'm going to say what I think I heard, you can tell me if I'm wrong enough, providing a report about all schools and their transfer policies, how many have been allowed transfers, and how many were not approved. I don't think we should call it denied, not approved. I don't have that. I mean,
Well, I'm just looking
have the
at,
bill.
I'm looking at the bill, and it's page 5 of the bill,
right.
starting section I on line 33.
I know, but I mean, you were talking about other, instead of a post audit,
Right.
instead of 10%, it would be 100% of the school districts. So, but now you're saying the State Board of Education is going to do an audit of every school district on a number of students that have been transferred, allowed transferred, and the number of students that were not approved transfers. Is this correct?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Every year, the State Board of Education does the audit of enrollments. They audit enrollment numbers. So school districts turn in, this is how many students we have, and then that is audited every year. So I assume that when districts are accepting out-of-district students, they will have them flagged or identified in some ways. I don't think that every school district, when we're talking about almost 300 school districts, I don't think every school district is going to have students coming in to their district. So it would simply be, as they do their count audit, which they do every year, they will also be looking at, in particular, they'll have perhaps an additional column, and that will simply be how many applications did they receive for out of district, how many were approved, how many were denied.
Okay, you're saying then that's just going to be an addition to what?
To the audit.
To the current audit.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
I do have another question about the first statements you made concerning having 2 times out of the year. I'm sorry, but I actually see that this is a much more cumbersome activity for school districts than we right now are perceiving that it is. And so if once a year, and I did take notes yesterday, so if once a year a school district has to provide a list of the capacity of grade level by grade level, or pupil teacher ratio, whatever the variety of criteria that are available, they do that once a year. That means that that does have to be inventoried by every school in a school district. In a small school district, that's not as cumbersome as a large school district, say like Kansas City, Kansas, or the Wichita School District. So now we're talking about that they would have to do that twice a year. So they would be doing it not, I mean, I'm just paraphrasing, I guess, kind of what I've heard you say. They would not only be doing it by May 1st, they'd have to be doing it by, I guess, December the 1st, in order to meet a semester transfer, because that's what we would probably be talking about if you're talking about mid-year. Again, that doesn't necessarily lend itself to the continuity of learning that we talk about we want to have for every child, which is the best for them to be staying in the school that they start in at the school year. But I just see this as just being pretty cumbersome, and I don't, I don't, it seems like if we want to start out looking at once a year and seeing how successful that is for our school districts, and then if, as we talked about other pieces of legislation, if this actually passes, making some changes, but this is a big leap within our state. And I think that would be why I would have to say that there's no school district in this state or no school organization that's supporting this whole idea that we as legislators are promoting, or some legislators are promoting. So if we're going to, it seems like we want to make it workable.
You can go ahead and say something, then I'll follow up. Go ahead.
Sure. I would just mention that assessments happen second semester, so it could
Right.
have an impact on assessments, perhaps. I don't know.
Could
It's
be
just-
positive, could be negative.
Yes.
It's difficult to
Depending
ascertain.
upon, yeah, and also depending upon how many seats you would have open and at what grade levels. So
Right.
just a thought.
One of the interesting things is, on the one hand, saying no school districts support this. We already know in the Topeka area, there are school districts that are already doing this. They're not everybody, but. Well, I'm gonna finish talking, and then you can raise your hand and I'll recognize you and you can talk. But I envision if we had it 2 times, first of all, you post those original what positions based on teacher-student ratio that's agreed upon by the school board, as well as the information that's been determined through the building assessment. So it's kind of interesting, but we find ourselves continuing to go back to that building assessment for school districts. So they would be able to ascertain what seats are available to maintain the student-teacher ratio that they have decided upon for their different buildings. So that would be posted and made available May or June. I don't think we've locked into a date yet, but let's say it's May. And then you go through that process for the start of the school year. You do that count date, the official count date, which is going to be in September. And so by that 1st of October, you will already know, based on what you set before the fall semester, you will know what seats are still available. So it's just a matter of updating that based on, did any parents apply to have their students attend that school and that district? And if none applied for, let's say, 5th grade, we still have those 5 seats available, then that number would stay static, and you would start that process again. To me, the original bill says that they can move 4 different times. I think that becomes 4 different times in a school year. I think that is a lot of movement. That sounds more like the type of movement that occurs with foster care, which we're opposed to. So I think if you made it by semester, I don't think that it would be overly cumbersome, because it all starts with where you were at the beginning, where you were with enrollment, and where through that assessment you were able to determine how many seats were originally available. Then you have the students come through that apply. They're accepted or denied based on availability, and you just update those numbers. And then you go through the process again in the spring in preparing for that next year. So that would be something that I think as we're working, and I shared this with Senator Dietrich, because we really will have to, today's Tuesday, we will have to work to get this amendments approved tomorrow and Thursday. But I think it would be best for us to just build on individual balloons as opposed to a balloon that has multiple things in it. So I anticipate that as we work through this, we'll just continue to move forward on that. Certainly, you know, part of this is that the funds follow the children, and that hasn't happened until the following year in our current situation. So we have Senator Gossage, then Senator Petty. I'm sorry.
Just a really quick question, Madam Chair. I wanted to clarify, so I really appreciated what Senator Diedrich had to share with us, and I think it's a very good idea. And I know as we're trying to put details into this, we're talking about inter-district as well as intra-district. So between different districts as well as within your district could go to a different school. No.
She indicated she hadn't mentioned that. I know I've spoken to that before. I believe Senator
Just
Erickson's
trying to
spoken to that
understand.
before.
And so what is it?
You can address what you want to.
Thank you. So I did not include intra-district because I really think that's a local issue because you know your buildings, you know their capacity, you know the issues. And so if somebody wants to transfer within a district, that is certainly a conversation between the families, the administrators, and, you know, for whatever reasons. We've done that every year. I mean, that's not something that's not common. But I didn't know that it belonged in this statute, so I didn't add it to this.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Madam Chair.
And that may be something that someone wants to add. I've heard from large districts that have very strict boundaries. It's very limited exceptions for moving. I've heard from parents that they would like to have that opened up within an individual school district. Other comments? Senator Petty.
Thank you. And I'll just lay these out here because there were questions that I came up after we went through this yesterday, and so they don't have to be answered right now. So as the senators are working on it, this might consider it. I wasn't sure, as we were talking about, whether behavior issues were a consideration at all. And once a student is suspended or expelled, are they not eligible? I think that was touched on. It did come, and also special ed considerations. I don't know that that's been spoken to at all. It did come up with this scenario that, so a family applies, they have 3 children, they all apply, one child gets picked by the random. That means the other 2 children would not be eligible that year, but they would be first preference the next year. I'm thinking as we went through this scenario, what that means. And so I guess just that clarification about multiple children in a family, because, hey, I think that's going to be a more than a one-time occurrence occurring that would be. But I guess that could be spoken to in the guidelines that are set by the school district. I don't know. I'm just laying those out there.
Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, committee, we are adjourned.